All right, so you found her, the used sailboat of your dreams. But before you sign on the dotted line, we're going to make sure she's not a money pit in disguise.
That's right, we're diving deep into used sailboat inspections, and this time we're focusing on the stuff you don't always see, the plumbing and electrical systems.
This is all about getting that peace of mind, knowing your dream boat won't turn into a nightmare.
And we're using this awesome guide to inspecting used sailboats as our trusty first mate.
Exactly. We'll break down the essentials and give you the knowledge to spot those potential deal breakers.
Because let's be honest, nobody wants to be stuck with a boat that's more trouble than it's worth.
Absolutely. So let's start with a part of the boat that, frankly, doesn't get enough attention until it's too late, thru-hulls.
Thru-hulls. Those unassuming little holes that can sink your dreams faster than you can say, Mayday.
Okay, now you're making me nervous. Why are they so often overlooked?
Out of sight, out of mind. Most people don't even think about them until there's a problem.
And by then, it's usually too late, right?
Exactly. It's like that Boat US study that found thru-hull failures are the #1 cause of recreational boat sinkings.
Wow, number one, that's terrifying. And here I was worried about barnacles scratching the paint.
Hey, those are important too. But yeah, a corroded thru-hull can turn a beautiful day on the water into a disaster in a hurry.
So this guide recommends replacing them every 5 years. Makes sense, especially given the harsh environment they're in.
Absolutely. Saltwater is unforgiving. And don't even get me started on what happens if you've got stray electrical currents in the water.
Okay, you're speaking my language. Let's get into the nitty-gritty. What are we looking for when we're inspecting these things?
First off, you got to find them, which isn't always as easy as it sounds.
Right, they're not always just out in the open.
Exactly. They can be hiding behind lockers, under floorboards, you name it. Don't be shy. Get in there and find them all.
Okay, so we've located all the thru-hulls. What's next?
Time to channel your inner Sherlock Holmes. Look for any signs of corrosion discoloration, streaks, those telltale greenish or white deposits.
Got it. So, like any suspicious characters, we don't want to just observe them from afar, right?
Right. Get hands-on, give them a little wiggle. Any movement at all means the sealant has failed, and that's a leak waiting to happen.
And while we're down there, what about the material?
Yes. Material matters. Bronze is the gold standard, but high-quality composites like Barillona are also great. They're super resistant to corrosions.
Okay, so bronze or Marilon, check. No wiggle, check. Anything else on the thru-hull hit list?
Just remember, when in doubt, call in a pro. A qualified surveyor can give you that extra peace of mind.
Solid advice. All right, so we've tackled the potentially boat-sinking thru-hulls. Now let's move on to something slightly less dramatic, but equally important. The plumbing.
Yes, the plumbing. The intricate network of pipes, tanks, pumps, and valves that keep things flowing smoothly. Or not.
And this is where that used sailboat can really come back to bite you, huh?
Oh, you have no idea.
Well, actually, that's why we're here. Enlighten me. What are some of the things we should be looking out for?
Well, first things first, you got to know what you're dealing with. Freshwater tanks, blackwater tanks. These are not created equal.
Blackwater tanks, that's well, let's just say the less glamorous side of boating.
To put it delicately. And you definitely want to make sure that system is ship-shape. Trust me, a leaky blackwater tank is not something you want to experience.
I'll take your word for it. Our guide emphasizes checking for leaks, of course, but also corrosion. And then there's the whole issue of proper discharge.
Absolutely. Speaking of discharge, we can't forget about the dreaded head.
Yes. The head. The source of so many boating horror stories. I have to admit I'm a little terrified to even ask, but what exactly are we looking for in a used boat toilet?
Well, the first question is, are we talking holding tank or portable?
Okay, so those are the two main options, right?
Right. Holding tanks are pretty common, but older ones can be a ticking time bomb. You want to make sure it's not cracked, the hoses are in good condition, and the fittings are secure.
And if it's not a newer holding tank, I'm guessing that means?
Yeah, that rubber valve on the toilet will probably need replacing. It's not the most glamorous job, but trust me, you'll be glad you did it.
Okay, I'm starting to feel a little overwhelmed with all this plumbing talk. On a scale of 1 to replace the entire head, how big of a red flag is a questionable toilet situation?
Let's just say it's definitely something to factor into your negotiations, but hey, at least it's not as bad as dealing with electricity. Yeah, a faulty electrical system can really zap your sailing dreams.
Okay, that's one way to put it. And our trusty guide tells us that older boats, with their original wiring, can be especially prone to electrical gremlins.
It's true. Back in the day, boats didn't have nearly as many electronics.
Yeah, no GPS, radar, fancy sound systems.
Right, all those modern conveniences draw a lot of power. Trying to run them on a system that was designed for a single light bulb and maybe a VHF radio, well, it's asking for trouble.
And that's before we even factor in any DIY upgrades the previous owner might have made.
Ah, yes, the dreaded boatyard butchery. Loose connections, improper grounding, things like that.
Sounds terrifying. So even for someone who can barely change a light bulb, what are some things we can look for to get a sense of the electrical system's health?
Good news. You don't need to be an electrician to spot the obvious red flags.
Okay, that's a relief. Give me the basics. What am I looking for?
Start with a good visual inspection. Frayed cables, those are bad news. Corroded battery terminals, another big no-no. And keep an eye out for those electrical panels with exposed backs. That's a sure sign of trouble.
It's like we're playing detective with the boat's electrical system. And speaking of getting to the bottom of things, the guide mentions a complete tutorial on rewiring a sailboat's electrical system. Is that something you think is worth checking out?
Absolutely. Even if you're not planning on rewiring the whole boat yourself, a little knowledge can go a long way. It helps you understand how everything works together and can save you a lot of headaches down the road.
Knowledge is power, as they say, or in this case, maybe knowledge prevents electrical fires.
Exactly. You got it.
Okay, so we've covered the wiring. Now let's talk about the heart of the electrical system, the batteries.
Ah, the batteries. They can make or break your trip.
Because imagine being miles offshore and...
Dead in the water.
Yep, that's what I was thinking. So our guide mentions that battery lifespan is a key factor. What should we be looking for there?
First things first, check the date codes if you can find them. Batteries don't last forever. Then give them a good visual inspection. Look for any signs of dirt, corrosion, bulging.
Okay, I think I can handle that.
And don't forget to check the fluid levels, especially in those older lead-acid batteries.
Fluid levels. Okay, now we're getting a little bit technical. What exactly are we looking for there?
You'll need a hydrometer for that.
A hydro what now?
A hydrometer. It's a tool that measures the specific gravity of the battery acid. Don't worry, it's not as complicated as it sounds. Basically, it tells you how much charge is left in the battery.
Okay, so another tool to add to my ever-growing boating toolkit.
You got it.
Now, assuming the batteries look okay, what about different types of batteries? Are some better suited for life at sea than others?
That's a great question. You'll typically see lead-acid, AGM, and lithium batteries on sailboats, each with its own pros and cons.
So, like most things in life, it comes down to cost versus convenience.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Lead-acid batteries, they're the most affordable, but they require a bit more maintenance. AGM batteries are sealed, so they need less upkeep, but they can be a bit pricier. And then there's lithium batteries. They're lightweight, super efficient, but they come with a hefty price tag.
Got it. So choose your weapon, or I guess choose your battery, depending on your budget and how much time you want to spend tinkering.
Exactly. Regardless of which type you choose, remember, a well-maintained battery bank is a happy battery bank.
All right, noted. Speaking of keeping things shipshape, we got to talk about keeping things smelling fresh because, let's be honest, a smelly boat kind of puts a damper on the whole living the dream thing.
You're preaching to the choir. And it's not just about avoiding those awkward moments when you invite guests aboard.
Right. There's the whole environmental aspect, too.
Exactly. A properly functioning sanitation system is crucial, both for keeping our waterways clean and for, basic hygiene on board.
So let's dive into the not-so-glamorous world of marine sanitation. Our guide recommends inspecting the entire system, not just giving the toilet a quick flush and calling it a day.
Absolutely. We're talking about really understanding the type of system, looking for any potential problems, and making sure everything's working as it should be. So first things first, what kind of system are we even dealing with? Direct discharge, holding tank, composting toilet.
Okay, so direct discharge, that sounds pretty self-explanatory. What goes in, goes out.
Right, but they're actually becoming less common because of regulations. A lot of areas require boats to have holding tanks to prevent direct discharge into the water.
Makes sense. So even if it is a direct discharge system, we still want to give it a thorough once-over.
Absolutely. Check those hose clamps, make sure those valves are functioning properly, and keep an eye out for any leaks or corrosion.
Got it. Now, speaking of holding tanks, what are we looking for there?
Well, like with most things, a visual inspection goes a long way. Look for any cracks, leaks in the tank itself, inspect all the hoses and connections, look for wear and tear, things like that. And don't forget about the vent fitting.
The vent fitting.
Yeah, it's super important. That little guy allows gases to escape overboard. Otherwise, well, you can imagine what happens.
Let's just say I don't want to be downwind if that vent's not working.
You and me both.
Yeah.
And speaking of unpleasant smells, our guide mentions that holding tanks are notorious for, well, odor issues.
Right, I've heard some horror stories. What usually causes that?
Usually it's a sign of improper ventilation or, infrequent pump outs.
So if you get a whiff of something funky when you board the boat, that's a red flag.
Oh, absolutely. Consider that a deal breaker.
Duly noted. So we've covered the toilet, the hoses, the holding tank. Anything else we should check before we wrap up this fragrant topic?
One last thing, the macerator pump.
The what now?
The macerator pump. If the boat has a holding tank, it probably also has one of these guys. It helps grind up the waste before it's discharged.
So it's like a garbage disposal for,
Exactly.
Eh.
But these pumps, they're known for getting clogged or failing altogether. So it's a good idea to ask the seller about the pump's maintenance history.
Because dealing with a broken macerator pump is not how I want to spend my first sailing trip.
Definitely not.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. Everything from those sneaky thru-hulls to the intricacies of keeping things smelling fresh on board.
And all this information, it's really about empowering you, the buyer, to make informed decisions.
Exactly, because knowledge is power, right? Or in this case, knowledge equals a safe and enjoyable sailing experience.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Now go forth and find your dream boat.
And remember, a little bit of due diligence goes a long way. Happy sailing, everyone.